I've been offered $10,000 to take a shot. One of my clients offered me 10,000. I said no. And everyone looked at me like, "Are you crazy?" But it was more so just I believe 100% is easier than 95. And when you say you're going to do something, it makes a lot of other decisions for you.
Welcome back to another episode of the Good Pod.
Good Drill Pod.
Good Drill Pod, Bobby likes to call it, which is the name of the show. We have Ross back. How you feeling, Ross? Feeling better?
Yeah, I feel good now.
Feeling
now
good.
That I'm next to you.
On brand. Good, that is true. We have Bobby.
How we doing?
And we have Drew Hanlen. What is the vibes, Drew? How are things?
Everything's good. Appreciate you guys having me on. I'm glad we worked this out.
So has it been more golf or more beer pong lately? What's new, man?
Well, first off, no beer pong. I don't know if you guys know this. I'm 35. I've never tasted alcohol. So that's a fun fact.
I've seen a video, though. You're really good at it.
Now, but I've never lost at it. People always will complain because they're like, well, obviously you're sober the whole time. Your partner's drinking for you, but yes, I do have fun. But no, I haven't been able to play golf lately either. I actually tore my calf about 3 months ago. And, so I'm just getting back to doing like plyometrics and stuff like that. So I've played 2 rounds of golf, I think, in the last 3 months. So I've got the itch right now to get back on the course.
Yeah. So if you're playing plyometrics, that means you're back pretty much, right? If you're getting
I can golf now. So I played twice last week, but it was a 3-month hiatus from the golf course, which was miserable, as all my boys would be texting me, "Hey, let's go play," and I had to be booted up instead and couldn't do anything. So.
Yeah, I don't want to take a crazy turn on this podcast, but you said you've never tasted alcohol, not once.
Never tasted alcohol. No, it was crazy. So, when I was 12 years old, I gave up sweets. So no soda, no birthday cake, no candy, no ice cream. And I did it for a month-long challenge just because the University of Missouri, Mizzou, their basketball team made their players do like a month-long challenge. And so being a little kid from St. Louis, I was like, you know what, if the best college in my state is doing it, I'm going to try to do it too. And after a month of doing it, my mom was like, why don't you do another month? And then it became like, hey, why don't you just keep doing this until you're done playing basketball? And so I went a decade, without eating any sweets, no soda, no candy, no anything. And when you don't do any of that, obviously you're not going to incorporate drugs or alcohol to the mix. So, I graduated college and had never, done anything. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to keep rolling with it. I had seen a lot of my friends make dumb decisions when they were, having a little too much fun, and I was able to have fun without it. So I decided it was a good kind of talking point when I was speaking to kids at camps or CEOs at on stage when I do corporate speaking, and so I've rolled with it ever since.
That's unbelievable. I was one of the guys doing all the things that you were talking about not doing. I actually just celebrated 12 years in recovery, completely sober. And it's actually funny you brought up the sweets because I'm on day 8 I'm trying to do a pre-New Year's challenge, right? Rather than wait till the 1st, I started last week. I haven't had any sweets in, I think today's day 8. So I'm a little bit behind you on both, but we're getting there.
No, I love that. No, it's great. I mean, it's, and trust me, I've been offered $10,000 to take a shot. One of my clients offered me 10,000. I said no. And everyone looked at me like, "Are you crazy?" But it was more so just I believe 100% is easier than 95. And when you say you're going to do something, it makes a lot of other decisions for you. So I think most of the time what happens is people will be like, I'm going to stop drinking for the most part. And then what happens is they go out and it's like, all right, is tonight a drinking night or a non-drinking night? And then if they have one drink, they're like, I already broke the streak. I might as well just have fun. And next thing you know, they're hungover the next morning and they feel like shit. And then also they're mad about themselves. They're like, damn, I let myself down. And then they're like, all right, I'm going to start over on Monday. And as you know, then that Friday, same decision comes around. And so I'm big on just kind of, being 100%. Like I am this or I'm not this, but I'm not going to kind of, flirt with that line of like, I'm kind of this, So I respect that you've been on your sober journey and that you're already starting the New Year's challenge. Because as you know, most people start the New Year's challenge and then January 6th comes and they're like, you know what, F it, I'm going right back to my normal bad habits.
Yeah, I need to draw those lines in the sand, though, as you did. It's like, it's got to be, I'm cutting out something. And it's like you said, 100 or nothing, and that seems to be what works for me.
You also
The
shot.
weird
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say the weird thing too is I think it's actually easier. I don't think people realize like it's actually easier. Now at the beginning, trust me, like I remember when I was 12 years old and you're having the cravings for sweets or your friends go out for ice cream and you're like, man, like one ice cream won't kill me. And that's the question I always get from parents is they're like, do you really think that not having sweets was the reason you played college basketball? I'm like, no, there's 0% chance that that was the reason. Now, do I think that the discipline that came from being able to say no to sweets, to be able to say no to all the things that all my other peers did, I do think the discipline was one of the big reasons why I was able to play college basketball and do what I do now.
It shows something about just your personality type in general, that you have the ability to commit to something, stick to it, see something through when everybody else is doing something else. And you're like, I'm not going on that side. I'm sticking to what I'm trying to do here, and I'm not influenced by others. And that's an indicator, I think, of successful people across the board in all walks of life, just being able to stick to their guns, despite what the masses are saying.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I mean, it's one of those things like you hear all the corny self-help gurus that are like, you're not born to fit in, you're born to stand out. But I mean, the truth is, like, in order to do special things, you've got to do special things. And I think that, for me, it's always been, my discipline. I was not blessed with height. I'm a 5'11" white guy. I always tell people, like, if I got to pick my ideal set of cards in life, I wouldn't have picked, the 5'11" white average athlete as a basketball enthusiast. But the one thing I was blessed with was I was blessed with an extreme level of discipline and a work ethic that is simply unmatched. And that allowed me to do some pretty cool things in my basketball journey.
Discipline over motivation is probably key in a lot of areas of your life, right?
I mean, 100%. I just think motivation wears off. You know what I mean? You see it all the time too. It's funny because, like in professional sports, you have the starting lineup and the national anthem, and then they come out and they all do their special handshakes, and then the jump ball happens, and you see some teams after being all hyped up, if they start off on a 10-0 run, you immediately see the energy drained, and that's on just like on a little scale. Then you think about people that have these diets or anything that they're after. You say the sobriety thing. I think the thing that he talked about, so many people struggle with that. So many people struggle with so many different things, but it's like, are you going to do it every day? Are you going to be about it all the time? Are you only going to do it when you feel good, when it's easy for you to do? Because I really believe that like the secret sauce is in what I call the unseen hours. Like when no one's watching, what are you going to do? The decisions you make, the choices you make, the things you do. You see that I love this. I love being at a park and watching a kid shoot on their own. And it's when no one's watching, there's no scouts there, there's no coaches there, and they shoot and they walk after the rebound, and then they go check their phone. And I'm like, that kid doesn't realize he's only cheating himself. And, probably after the 45-minute workout that they do, they take a picture of the park and they post it grinding. And it's like, dude, you're only cheating yourself. We're going to see what you did in the unseen hours when it comes game time. And, we're going to see, the kind of the results from all the decisions you make. And so, I'm a big believer in just going all in and doing everything you possibly can, because it only benefits or it only hurts you.
Speaking of the secret sauce, you've worked with NBA champions, NBA MVPs, NBA scoring leaders. So obviously a ruthless all-in mentality is really important. But what else separates the league's greatest players from everybody else?
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people that there's three things that I look for whenever I'm working with a player and deciding if I'm going to add on a new client. The first thing is they have to love basketball, because there's a lot of things that come around basketball that if you don't love basketball, you're just not willing to put in the extra effort. You're not willing to watch the film. You're not willing to, do all the treatment that's necessary. You're not willing to push through the fatigue or the struggles or the stresses that come from being, an NBA athlete. So the first thing is they have to love the game. I also don't want to love the game more than them. Like there's been times where I've started to work with players and I can tell I want their success more than they want their success, and that just never works out in the long run. So you have to love it. Two is you have to be extremely coachable. believe it or not, these highly successful athletes, they're constantly craving criticism, they're craving feedback, they're watching film, they're looking at analytics, they're walking through and talking through things on the basketball court so that when they get out there, they have the solutions for the problems that they've been experiencing. And so they have to be coachable. They've obviously got to a certain level primarily by themselves with the help of a lot of other people. But to get beyond where they can take themselves, they have to, crave that coaching and crave, criticism. And then the last thing is they have to be willing to put in the hard work. I'm obsessive. I mean, you guys, anybody that knows my story knows I'm obsessive. I'm constantly breaking down film. I'm constantly looking at analytics. I'm constantly on the road, working guys out during the season, off season, doing as much work as their bodies can handle. Obviously, everybody, uses load management these days to make sure that you're working smart and not just hard. But I'm still a big believer in like the hard work. You know what I mean? That gets the results. And so I think those are the three things that separate players. But I would say there's a cloud that hangs over those three things, and it's the mentality. It's funny because I'm up here in Philadelphia right now, and I'm working with the guys I work with on the Sixers. But Tyrese Haliburton comes and plays them on Friday night, and it's pretty cool because a couple years ago when Tyrese was playing for the Sacramento Kings, he was averaging 12 points a game, and they were getting ready to play the Sixers. And his agent was like, hey, you guys are both going to be in Philadelphia. Is there any way we could all go out to dinner? Because I really think that if you get with Tyrese, you can turn him into a special player. And we sat down, and I had broke down his film, and I was like, dude, I think you have a lot of tools to be really good. The problem is your mentality is messed up. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you're just not aggressive. You don't understand that like sometimes being too unselfish is actually selfish. It actually hurts your team.
Yeah.
And so he was like, dude, I want to work with you. I know that you help guys on the court with their skills, but I also know that you help guys off the court, develop the mentality that bleeds onto the court that turns them into killers. And so I said, all right, I'll make you a deal. I said, tomorrow night when you guys play the Sixers, you have to shoot at least 14 FGAs, 14 field goal attempts, not 14 shots and you got fouled on a couple of them. Like the box score better say 14 FGAs at the end of the night. If you do that, you're going to show me that you're willing to like actually try new things. Because at the time he was averaging like maybe 10 field goal attempts a game. And so I was trying to show him like incrementally we can build you into a killer. And that next night in Philadelphia, he scored 38 points, career high. He had never had over 28. 28 was his previous career high. And he was 11 for 19 from the field. And he was like, wow, I thought I needed new skills to take my game to the next level. What I really needed more than anything was a new mindset to take my game to the next level. And we started working together, and sure enough, last year was an all-star starter that helped, lead the Pacers to the Eastern Conference Finals. And I'm telling you, I still battle with him to this day. We were looking at a graph the other day that was really, really cool. I'm going to show it to you guys because, I think it'll add to the pod. But he's like, just show me some proof that like, the more I shoot, the more it helps us win because I need that. And this is a direct correlation of this is him not shooting and this is him shooting and the win percentage of the Pacers. And It's just crazy. But there are some times where players like want to shoot more selfishly. But for the Pacers, literally the more aggressive Ty is, the better they are win percentage. And believe it or not, the more field goal attempts that he shoots, the more assists he actually gets. So the more he puts pressure on the rim, obviously, then the harder it is for the other teams to guard them. And then he's such a good passer, he finds everybody. But that's a great, a long-winded answer to answer what makes the best player special is those three things, the characteristics that I think all great players have, plus the mentality to be able to put themselves in just this confident state that allows them to really, get the most out of themselves.
Drew, what would you do if the situation was reversed and he came to you, please give me confidence, Drew. Show me that when I shoot more, my team wins more, and the graph was an indirect relationship instead. What would that conversation be like?
Yeah, players hate me for it, but it's exactly what I've been telling Kelly Oubre Jr. Kelly Oubre started out the season, and because Joel was out, because Paul George was out with injuries, Kelly was asked to play a different role than he's used to, and he was being really inefficient. And, I went to Philly. I showed him, a clip of like 21 times that I thought he had forced shots that he shouldn't have shot. And I was like, I promise you, you averaged 20 points a game in Charlotte and you're rewarded with a minimum deal. Last year, you contributed and impacted winning more and your salary went up. And guess what? If you're even more efficient, your salary will keep going up. And since that conversation, the last 12 games, Kelly's shooting, I think, 53% from the field and 39.7% from three, and averaging, I think, 12 points a game instead of what he was averaging, maybe 16 or something. But that impacts winning more. And so, my job is to help players impact winning. And I think that there's a variety of ways to do that. Sometimes it's like Haliburton, it's pushing them to be more aggressive. And other times it's telling them to be more efficient. So really, when I first started, I think that it was all about buckets, buckets, buckets. You know what I mean? Like that's how most trainers are. But as I've evolved, I've realized that the reason that the majority of my clients have max contracts and have been able to do special things is because they impact winning at a high level.
So, Drew, you're also a life coach in a lot of different ways, on top of being a skills trainer. And I've heard you say Joel is one of the hardest working players in the NBA, if not the hardest working player in the NBA. How do you help him go through a time when there's a media narrative that he's not the hardest worker in the league?
Yeah, I mean, the media says a lot of things that aren't true. I mean, it's funny because I'm in the trenches with these guys. I'm also in all these different locker rooms around the NBA. I know what's going on and what's not going on. A lot of times people just grab onto these narratives and they run with them.
Right.
And so we don't pay attention to him, to be honest with you. It does, as his friend, not as his trainer, but as his friend, it sucks just because you don't go from picking up a basketball for the first time at 16 years old to being back to back to back leading scorer in the NBA without hard work. You don't go from at Kansas making 1 3-pointer at Kansas while shooting 66% from the free throw line and averaging 11 points a game to being a guy that averaged last year 35, 12, and 6 in the games that he played. It's impossible, to be that good. So any real basketball player knows how good Joel is, and they know how skilled he is, and they know how dominant he is, and all of that comes from hard work, both in the film room, in the weight room, and on the court. And so, anybody that's been around Joel has seen how much, time and energy and effort that he's poured into, his game, and they've also witnessed what he's went through that the media has no clue about. There's a lot of things that once he's done with his career that he'll be able to share, but he's literally put his body and his life on the line so many times just to try to give his team a better chance at, getting a better seed or winning another game or, advancing in the playoffs. And so, I think when it's all said and done, I think real hoopers will respect, how good he was. And to be honest with you, if you really evaluate the peak of Joel Embiid as an individual, I know he hasn't been able to, win a championship, but as an individual, he's had one of the best individual peaks that this game has ever seen.
That's awesome. The last 3 questions you were asked, every answer that you gave us was centered around finding the truth or presenting the truth to the player you're working with, right? Whether it's Tyrese Haliburton, and you didn't have to manufacture anything. You didn't have to look or pull, from nowhere. You were able to show him the truth, and that made a profound impact on his life. With Oubre, showing him truth, a completely different question. But what'd you start with? You started with the truth, and then even talking about the media getting, on Embiid. It's like, well, you're looking at the truth. You're in the locker room. You're seeing the work he's put in. You told the story. That's the truth, and that's what I'm constantly trying to do. And it's like, I have my thoughts and things I believe in, but what I'm overly concerned with is the truth. And that's when I'm working with players. I've got a lot of high school, college athletes, guys overseas, and that nature. It's like, the most valuable thing I can do for any of these players is tell them the truth. And that's it. And that seems to always make the most profound impact on their life. And it's the thing that strengthens the relationships. It's not like, my job is not to make them feel good. My job is to make them good, right? And how I'm going to do that is how I deliver the truth to them, because they're going to have that obsession. They're going to have that love for the game. Going back to that, you were talking about, you use the word killers, right? What instills that? Because it doesn't, like, you might have helped Tyrese Haliburton become that killer, but he had something in him before him that propelled him to the NBA level as every other player did that you work with. Do you see a commonality with how they were raised, right? Or something in their upbringing that is across the board, that they have something in their story that propelled them to have that obsession, or do you think they're just born with it?
I don't know. I think that, the Mike Tyson quote comes to mind where he was like, you guys are manufactured killers. I'm a born killer. And I've had people ask me all the time, like, can you turn somebody into a killer? Can you turn somebody into an asshole? Can you turn somebody? And the truth is, I think that you can help them get to new levels. I think you can also untap levels that they haven't been able to get to on their own. But I think that there's so many different driving forces. You have some people that, have been the most highly touted, players ever since they were younger. And they've always kind of, worked from a way of, I got to protect what's mine, where you have other guys that are under recruited that are more so like, I never got what those guys got, so I've always been chasing them. And I don't know. I mean, I really do think that it's our job as coaches, as trainers, as anybody that's, around these guys, is just to find ways to unlock that. There's constantly times where I'm putting my guys against each other. It might be like before a game, like Friday night, Sixers versus Pacers. You better believe that 3 hours before the game, Tyrese Maxey and Tyrese Haliburton are going to get a group text, and I'm going to be in the group text talking trash both ways. Like who's the better point guard? Who's the better Tyrese? Oh man, Max. It's just what I do. And so there's different ways to unlock that. There's other times where you might create a rivalry that isn't even a rivalry, but you create it in their mind so that it really unlocks something every time that they play those certain athletes. Other times it might be bulletin board material. Oh man, did you see what this guy said and this guy said? And what they'll say is, it doesn't matter, but they know. And right after the game, they'll, want to put the middle finger right up to them. So I think that it's our job as skills coaches to get them good at basketball, to get them good at, confidence and whatever. But as like the friend, as the motivator, as the whatever, you got to do anything you can to get them a little bit of extra motivation to, to go out there. Another crazy Haliburton story. He really barely tapped on this, but New York Knicks Game 7. He had that series. He had like 4 going into Game 7. He had 4 really good games and 2 terrible games. And so he's like, hey, what do I got to do? Give me something for Game 7. And I was like, first off, Game 7, I shouldn't have to give you something. I started going off on him for that. But I was like, all I want you to do is find a fan courtside and go at them. I don't care if it's Spike Lee or whatever, go at them. And so sure enough, early in the game, a fan said something. And his name's John Chetrich. And John stood up and said something. And Tyrese hit a 3 a couple possessions later and turned around and started barking at him. And the whole rest of the game, it's your fault. It's your fault. He wasn't even playing against the Knicks. At that point, it was him versus the fan, John, in the front row. And that was what fueled him that whole game. And so, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think it's something you're born with. I think it is developed over time. I think that it's everything, though. I think there's a lot of things in life. It could be, that you got cut from a team like Michael Jordan and it motivated you. It could be Tiger Woods where his dad was dangling keys every single time he was putting and that motivated him. It could be something where you just want to make something out of yourself and that fuels you. I think there's so many different things that fuel players. I think it's your job to find as many as you can to tap levels that, just constantly evolve your game and evolve your mentality.
That Game 7 was your fault, Drew. That's what you just admitted. I was at that game.
It was crazy because David Lee, was my first NBA client, and David was good friends with the owners of the seats, and he actually brought John to the game. And it was hilarious because after the game, David sent me a picture and said, hey, ask Tyrese if this was the guy he was chirping at. And Tyrese said, no, it was the guy next to him. And sure enough, it was John that was the +1 to the game. And we were just dying laughing because even after that, I remember that he hit up Pat McAfee, and Pat was like asking about the fan, and he goes, hey, Drew found out his name. His name is this. Make sure that it goes on air and says it, because he wanted all Knicks fans to basically blame John for stirring up the pot.
Damn, Drew.
I love trash talking myself, Drew.
But you can't handle it.
No, the problem is I go too far these days.
Yeah.
I think that's why I want. Have you ever been in that kind of situation where you're talking trash and you take it too far?
All the time.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
do you feel
I've
like
gotten-
in the moment you're loving it, but then later you're like, did I take that too far? Was I being a little too much?
It was funny. Brad Beal was the first guy I ever started working with. So Brad started working with me when I was 17. He was 13. So he was a freshman in high school. And we're both from St. Louis. Believe it or not, I was better than him back then. I was player of the year in Missouri, and he was still up and coming. And so we used to work out together. And then it became, once he started getting really good, then I started working him out, and instead of me just training alongside him and stuff like that. But Brad and I, because we have that brother relationship, every summer we get in like literally like a physical fight where we end up throwing the ball at each other or kicking the ball at each other or starting to yell at each other, where we go personal levels that like shouldn't be shared because we know everything about each other.
Right.
We just, care about each other that much. And it was funny because last summer, my video guy came over, and it was our last workout of the summer, and we were dapping it up and we were just talking about stuff. And Sam came over and said, hey man, you guys realize this was the first summer you guys didn't fight? And it was just, that's what it is. You know what I mean? Like all my guys at some point, like ghost me for a week at a time or a month at a time, because I do push strings and push levels that, are very uncomfortable for most people. But I feel like so many professional athletes and celebrities have so many yes men around their corners that like I'm the one that can keep it real with them, and they know I'm doing it out of love. Like I never do it like out of spite. I never do it out of like anger. I always do it out of like trying to help them and get them to a new level. So I mean, of course, there's times where I cross a line, or the timing isn't right, or the delivery isn't right. But deep down, they all know I'm doing it out of love and not out of hate, which is where most trash talk comes from.
A lot of the league's best players and the players you work with are great in the mid-range, right? And I think the league's best players still need a great mid-range game. I think it's a huge separator in the playoffs. But now the biggest criticism revolving around the NBA is that players are taking too many threes. Is that a fair criticism?
I mean, it's just a different game. I'll use Jayson Tatum, for example. It's funny because I have half the Celtics fans on social media that praise me like crazy. They're like, oh my God, you've developed Tatum into this playmaking guy that's super efficient. He shoots threes and gets to the rim at a high clip. And then I have the other half. Every night I get literally 100 to 500 DMs from angry fans that, that criticize the work that I do with all my guys. But the truth is, the Boston Celtics years ago saw that Jayson actually finished with the highest percentage of his shots came from long twos in the league.
Right.
And they were like, we got to change this. And so there was one summer where all we did was we basically played one-on-one where he had to shoot threes or get to the basket. He was not allowed to shoot in the mid-range. And so what we did was it was 3 points for a three, 3 points for a layup, or 1 point for a mid-range shot. But then defensively, it was the reverse. If I got a stop from the three, it was 1 point for me. If I got a stop at the rim, it was 1 point for me. And if I got a stop in the mid-range, it was 3 points for me. So mathematically, it made no sense to shoot a mid-range. Like there was no reason, because you got 1 point for a make and 3 points for a miss. And that really helped him start developing a more efficient game. And while I do believe the exact same thing as you. I grew up, trust me, a Michael Jordan fan. He grew up a Kobe Bryant fan. We loved the mid post and we loved the mid range, and that's what we spent a lot of his high school and college years working on. And we've sprinkled it back into his game where it's like, hey, don't force a drive downhill. An uncontested mid range shot is better than a highly contested at the rim.
Right.
But the truth is, where you get most of your assists, where you get most of your fouls are at the rim. Where you get most of your threes, obviously, are behind the line. And so the game is like, look for a three. If you don't have a three, try to get to the basket. If you don't have the basket look, try to find a teammate that's open. And I think that's what's made the Celtics so good is they have a bunch of players that are willing passers. They're all good shooters, so they can space the floor. And a lot of them are good at getting downhill, so they can, constant, what we call dominoes, where it's like one pass leads to another pass, which leads to another drive, which leads to an open shot. So again, long-winded answer to say, in the playoffs, sometimes there's a time where you just got to get a bucket. A bucket is a bucket. And if you look at a lot of the NBA champions, a lot of them, their key players, from Michael Jordan to Kobe Bryant to Hakeem Olajuwon to Dirk Nowitzki to Dwayne Wade to, keep going down the list. They've all had a mid-range. The modern NBA is just saying the best shots are three-pointers at the rim, and then you take the mid-range if those aren't available.
I assume a lot of Tyler's improvement has been because of the change to his shot profile, right?
100%. I mean, that's all it is, he's shooting more threes and he's getting downhill more, and his assists are up because he's not shooting as many, contested twos. And so, again, it's funny because basketball purist, and when I say purist, I mean people that like grew up watching the game, so now they're, they don't like the analytic world that we live in, but it's just what wins games, and ultimately that's what you're trying to do, is win games. And so Tyler's shot profile has contributed greatly to, what I think is going to lead him to his first All-Star game this year. I think he has a very good case at, north of 24 points, north of 5 rebounds and 5 assists. And really, he's been the one option on that Heat team this year. As long as they keep winning and he keeps being efficient at the level he is, I think you'll see him be an All-Star for the first time. So I think that one thing that's important, and I already touched on this earlier, is there's a lot of basketball players that look pretty that have never won. And, it's, do you want to win or do you want to look pretty? And it pains me to say this because I loved a lot of them, but like Allen Iverson never won a championship. He was one of my favorite players. And again, winning a championship also is about your team.
100%.
Also about, there's a lot of factors that go into it, but Allen Iverson never won a championship. And again, one of my favorite players of all time. Carmelo Anthony never won a championship. Awesome. Tracy McGrady, another elite bucket getter, never won a championship. James Harden, again, one of the best scorers that we've ever witnessed, never won a championship. So I think that, those guys will always be respected because as an individual and as a talent, they were unbelievable. But I think sometimes you almost have to change your game to be able to impact winning. And then also there's a lot of other contributing factors. You have to have a great team, a great coach. You have to stay healthy. You have to peak at the right time. All those things matter. But, I do think that, team basketball and efficient basketball is what wins.
I saw a clip of James Harden talking about not regretting, but he was talking about his whole situation of saying, you know what, I'm going to put the ego to the side. I'm going to the Nets and I'm going to play with these guys. I'm going to play with KD. I'm going to play with Kyrie, and I'm going to take on this lesser role because I want to win. And when he said it, I believed him. And then he went on and said, okay, now I'm in this current situation that I'm in. I've done this a few times now. And he's like, you know what? Like, I left a lot of money on the table.
He also said he sacrificed his swag.
He sacrificed his swag too. Yeah, I mean, I think that was whatever. But he said like almost like a regretful thing of he went for winning. He went for it. He put the ego to the side, and he's like, I lost so much out of this. You know what? I want to go back to the player that not only was I that player, but he was saying that he still is that player. He still has that, but he just lost some confidence. What do you think about that dynamic of there's a money aspect to this, and even with high schoolers, there's an aspect of okay, you know what? Screw my high school team. Like, why do I care about my high school team? I'm playing in college next year, or in college, I'm going to go play in the pros. There's a certain subset of players that are on a team, which is probably 90% of them, that won't move on to the next level. It doesn't matter what level that you're on. You're not going to move on to the next level, but there is a few, which happen to be the players that probably have the most impact on their team, that they have that dynamic. Every single team I played on, there's always players on my team that they're either going to go from college to pro, or with me, I was probably one of those players that was saying, I'm going to go play in college next year. I'm in high school. I got to go. I got to win, but I also got to do my thing. What do you think the play is there, and what should be almost like a tactic or strategy that players have to make decisions with those two things in mind?
Yeah, I mean, first off, let's talk about James Harden being, he's led the league in scoring multiple seasons and then also led the league in assist. You know what I mean? That just shows you his adaptability. That shows you how special of a player he is and how talented he is. And the Nets, let's be real, if they stayed healthy, if Kevin Durant doesn't step on the line, like there's a lot of things that could have changed that narrative if things went right. The same thing, like even in Philadelphia, him and Joel became one of the most dynamic two-man games that we've seen, pick and roll. Joel led the league in scoring. James led the league in assists. Yeah. And Joel's health wasn't there in that playoff run. Remember, people forget, they were up 3-2 on the Celtics, going into game 6. And so what I would say is this. I think that, the best situations are when you can shine at your brightest in an impactful way of winning. And I truly believe, like Jayson Tatum's a great example. There's people that hate on Jayson's MVP case because they're like, his team's really good. And I'm like, Jayson right now is leading his team in points, rebounds, assists, 3-pointers. And I'm going, do you realize how hard that is as the number one option? Jayson could easily, if you put him on one of the bottom teams, he would easily lead the league in scoring. If you put him on the Wizards, he would go average 35 to 40 points a game if he wanted to. But that necessarily wouldn't lead to winning. And then there's other cases where I'll give you another example because I just used the Wizards. Brad Beal was on the Wizards and he had back-to-back seasons. He averaged 30 points a game. And people at the time were criticizing him. One year he didn't even make the All-Star game. And he averaged 30 points. He finished the season averaging 30 points a game. Didn't make the All-Star game because they were like, you're doing it in a losing way. But then when Brad left the Wizards, they've been completely irrelevant. And so you're going, Brad maybe wasn't good enough to carry the Wizards to a championship or the playoffs, but they became completely irrelevant the second that he left. And so maybe we should have given Brad a little more credit for even keeping them around in games. And so I don't think there's a right answer, to be honest with you. I think that the way fans nowadays look at everything is completely biased based on who their favorite athletes are. There was a narrative that Luka could not win MVP because they were in the play-in game. And now, you look at Jokic as the front runner, but he's in the play-in game. It was like just last season, the same writers that are writing stuff said that Luka couldn't get it because they were in a play-in game, but now it's okay because, this. Or, you look at the narrative of certain guys don't have enough talent around them. And it's like, wait, didn't they win a championship with those exact same core guys in Denver? They won the same thing. And then you look at winning and losing. I look at it for Joel all the time, but like Kevin Garnett, as a number one option, only made it past the first round in Minnesota one time in I think 11 or 12 or 13 years. But then when he went to the Celtics and had a really good team, a couple Hall of Famers around him, they won. Does that mean that he wasn't good in Minnesota, or does that mean he got better in Boston? I just think it shows that like, the truth is a lot of these narratives that we drive are completely biased, and it's all hot takes just to get, clickbait basically these days, instead of looking at how good is that basketball player, that we're witnessing out there on the court.
Speaking of narratives, do you think we put too much stock into team success when we're comparing individual great players?
I mean, I think that it goes both ways. I think that sometimes we put not enough stock in how winning people actually sacrifice for winning, and they should get credit for that.
Right.
And there's other times where we don't give enough individual credit for people that just don't have enough around them to win games. I think it's
agree.
both ways.
Yeah.
And so, Michael Jordan was really, really good before they won championships. There was a playoff series where he got swept and averaged over 40 points a game against the Boston Celtics that were unbelievable. Then he gets, one of the greatest coaches of all time. He gets Scottie Pippen, one of the greatest players of all time. Dennis Rodman, one of the greatest rebounders of all time. Steve Kerr, one of the greatest shooters of all time. Add in Luke Longley, add in Tony Kukoc, add in all the other players he had, and then he wins championships. Michael Jordan was great before all those guys got there. It was just he needed those guys to get over the top.
Yeah.
Everybody does. LeBron James was unbelievable, but didn't win a championship until he added great pieces around him. And so I think that to win, you do need help. But that is part of being great, is sometimes you have to sacrifice to win, and we should look at it both ways. Jayson Tatum, a great example. His individual stats could be higher if he didn't have the talent around him, but he's had to personally sacrifice so that he could impact winning at a higher level. There's other guys that have done really special things, but they just haven't had the talent around them to, contribute to winning. Ultimately, that's what it matters.
I'd like to bring it back to you for a second. Was there a moment through, I know you played Division I basketball, you're getting out of college. Was there a moment where you're like, I'm going to go train NBA players, and that was the plan? You had a vision, you put in the work and achieved the vision, or did it kind of come out of nowhere?
I mean, like I said, I started training Brad when he was 13. I was 17. And then when I was a sophomore in college, I started training David Lee. I remember there was one time we were at Cheesecake Factory. Steph Curry had just signed his, I think it was a $44 million deal. Remember that was when his ankle was messed up. And so he was really happy that he had the security of that first contract. And we went to Cheesecake Factory to celebrate. And we're sitting there and David was like, hey, are you going to go watch Drew play against your brother, Seth? And he's like, what do you mean? And he's like, opening night, Drew plays against your brother. And he's like, oh, I didn't know you coached college basketball, Drew. Steph said that to me. And Dave was like, no, he plays. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, Drew plays at Belmont and they're playing against Duke opening night. And he'll be like, guarding your brother. We should go to the game. And Steph was like, first off, hold on. I didn't know you still play college basketball. And David, like, what is an NBA All-Star doing, like listening to a college basketball player, So I had just been doing this forever. David's response was pretty good. He was like, listen, Phil Jackson can't beat Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan in one-on-one, but he can make Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan better versions of himself. It's like, Drew's not a better basketball player than me, but he can make me a better basketball version for myself. And so I always thought that was, a really impactful moment where I realized, like, yeah, like I don't have to be as good as these guys to help them become better versions of themselves. But I mean, I always knew that this is exactly what I wanted to do.
I think I want to get into some basketball nerd skill development stuff. So Drew, I think the easy question would be, how does adding live defense to a workout enhance the workout, right? But what do you feel like the benefits are to 1-on-0 training?
I mean, I think that 1-on-0 walkthrough, talk through, film breakdown sessions, I think those are important because that's where you learn the nuances. That's where you're not just going to go out there and play 5-on-5 and then just magically have a new move mastered.
Right.
But what you need to do is you need to master that move and then apply that move into game setting. So I always go like film first, then walk through, talk through, so I can make sure that they understand it. I always say if they can't teach it to me, they don't understand it well enough to be able to thoroughly do it and master it. Once they can teach it to me, then we go block practicing, basically. We rep it out until they feel like, I got it. Most of the time, I don't do like 6 reps, 8 reps. I just say, yo, rep that shit until you got it. You tell me when you're ready to move on. Then once they have it, then we'll go like 1 on dummy defense, meaning like the defender is giving them so let's say we're working on like a hang pull-up. Then it would be like, hey, if the defender drops, you shoot it. If the defender presses up, you drive it. There's only 2 reads. It's shoot it or drive it. And you work on that over and over again. And then once they master that, then you say, okay, now we're going live and just get them, in the exact spots on the floor, in the exact scenarios that they're going to be in, so that when they're in those scenarios in games, they have the confidence because they've done it over and over and over again.
What are the things that you look for when you're saying, all right, you're saying master? Like, what are the things that you're looking for in the example that you gave with the move that you gave? Like, what are the specific things that you could say, okay, you're getting better at this or you're not getting it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the first thing is like do it until you can't get it wrong instead of doing it until you get it right a few times. You know what I mean? Like if I'm sprinkling in a good rep every once in a while, that doesn't mean I've mastered it.
No, I'm saying like more specifically, like what is the thing that actually makes a good rep? Like I was, do you know who Jerry Powell is by any chance?
Yeah.
So I went to Jerry's for 8 years and he's a stud. Love him to death. Love all the guys there to death. And something that he always taught about in and out was like sell the body, sell the ball, sell everything, right? And that's what he would define as like doing the move, doing it correctly. And then as I got older and started kind of breaking things down and working with players and trying to understand like what is the actual things that matter for this thing to make an impact when they have the ball in an actual game. And I got more and more into it. It's like me telling them, okay, this is how I subjectively think that an in and out should go based on what Jerry taught me all those years. I maybe don't agree with that. I don't think you have to sell the ball in the body, and everybody would kind of do it a little bit differently. So for you, it's like, are there some things when it comes to a move that would make it more or less efficient? And are there general things across a set of moves that make them better or worse?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So to answer your question, I think it's individual specific. And so what that means is, like I'll give you an example, like what I call get in, get out, where you get inside the 3-point line, then you shuffle outside the 3-point line. There are some players like Steph Curry that basically take a outside step and then an inside step and then a hop. So they go like a 1-2 and then a hop. That's what gets him on balance. That's what gets his separation. There's other players like James Harden that makes it more of like a 3-stepper, where it's like a tap, tap, tap that you've grown accustomed to. Then there's other players like Jayson Tatum's more of a pull. And so what will happen is, like, when I added that to like Tyrese Maxey's game, I'll show him all three on film. We'll walk through and talk through all three. We'll try all three things out. And then it basically becomes, hey, which one do you feel most comfortable with? Which one do you feel most confident with? Which one do you think that you're going to use most? And the answer might be, I like these two, and we might just throw something out. So I think and then it's basically different for every person. You know what I mean? Like, if you look at Joel Embiid's hezzy pull-up, it looks a lot different than Jayson Tatum's hezzy pull-up. And I taught both of them it. You know what I mean? Jayson likes to keep the ball high and tighter because that allows him to keep the ball lower on his pocket, which gets more arc on his shot. Whereas Joel, he likes to pick the ball up earlier so that, like, he can either go up and draw a foul if somebody's hand's there, or because he's 7 foot, if they pull their hand back to avoid the foul, then he gets a clean shot with them not being able to contest. So I think, and Joel's more of a, like, he likes to drop his hips into it to really sell the drive to get people to back up, whereas Jayson more likes to float so he gets more rhythm. So to me, I don't think there's one right way to teach any move. I think it's more so, hey, this is what I've seen work from these players that are similar to you, your body type, your speed, your athleticism, your game, and then we just kind of pick and pull from everything. So it's like, when I look at like jab steps, for instance, like Jayson back in high school, it wasn't like, I was like, Kobe jab, this is how we're going to do it. It was like, hey, here's how MJ did it. Here's how Kobe did it. Here's how T-Mac did it. Here's how Melo did it. Here's how KD does it. And then we kind of pick and choose what nuances work and feel the best and work the best. And then what works we do more of, and what doesn't we make a pivot.
Yeah.
Broad question. What's your take on shooting form, right? When do you touch it? When do you not touch it? How do you go about touching it? I imagine you're going to go to it's an individual approach, but I'd like to hear about how you go about that. You work with Haliburton, unconventional shot, it's successful, right? You work with other people. I think we can see commonalities between shooters and things that they possess. As you were saying, I'm going to show this player these videos of these three players performing this and get outside the three, right? Is it the same idea?
Yeah, very similar. I mean, it's like, if it's not broke, don't break it. If there's little tweaks or adjustments that'll help it, then we tweak it. Haliburton's a great example, obviously, because he has a really unorthodox shot. The problem with unorthodox shot, though, is like there was a time, like even at the beginning of the season where he was struggling shooting the ball. And he looks to me and he's like, hey, what do I got to do? And I'm like, I don't even know what you're doing when you make shots. Like, do a little bit less of this. Like, and right. He's like, yo, you're such an asshole. Like, but I'm like, then what I do is I compare shots side by side. So then I'm like looking at what he does when he makes shots, what he does when he misses shots, and I'm trying to fix that. There's other times where, like, Tyrese Maxey started off the season, he was up and down, and there were people that literally were asking me like, hey, what did you guys change in his shot? I'm like, do you guys think I would change his shot? He's been a 40% shooter the last couple of years. We didn't touch his shot. He just hasn't been getting the same looks because Joel's been off the floor. And so, Joel, when he sets screens, he gets guys open. And then he also gets double teamed. And so he gets kickouts. And his shot profile has changed. He's shooting a lot harder shots. The difficulties changed. Right. But, I mean, the answer is everybody's body's different too. I'll give you another one. Jayson Tatum's double jointed in his elbow. So when he shoots, his elbow goes not out, but like in. And so that changes things. There's also players that, Zach LaVine doesn't have the same wrist flexibility. So if you see Zach, he sets the ball and then he shoots it, a little bit different than like more of a lift and snap kind of release. So if you don't have wrist flexibility, it changes. You look at Steph Curry. Steph Curry actually starts with his hand on the side of the ball and then rotates it. Whereas you look at, Kevin Durant shoots it over here and shoots it. So, I mean, and there's been a lot of things like RJ Barrett. We had to change his shot where his shot, he used to shoot. A lot of lefties actually have inverted elbows, and we moved his elbow out, and it was great in the pre-draft. Then he went to the Knicks, and they were like, no, we're tucking your elbow back in. He was broke his rookie season. And I was like, we're going back to what worked in the pre-draft. It's going to help. He moved his elbow out, and he shot 40% his second year. And then again, slippage occurs all the time, but he's back to shooting his elbow out, and he's having another great efficient season. So I think again, it's all about kind of what works and what doesn't, and a lot of it's trial and error. To be honest with you, there's things you do know. You do know that almost all good shooters have their hand spread middle of the ball at the point of release. You do know that the ball is rolling off of these two fingers. It doesn't matter how it starts, it matters how it finishes. You do know that the majority of good shooters keep the ball in front of their face. There are some people like Jokic has great touch behind his head, but if you look historically, almost every good three-point shooter, the farther out you shoot, the lower the shot pocket and the more it's in front of your face. So if you want to shoot from range, you got to lower the shot pocket and kind of keep it in more of a one motion shot than the old school set shots that you used to see in the the 60s, 70s, and 80s and stuff like that. I do know we've done a study. Balance is directly correlated to makes and misses. The more you twist, the more you miss. We do know that if you start with your feet wide and bring them together, inverted, results. So basically you want to keep your feet wide, your base wide throughout your shot. Obviously the less, the less you're doing with your shot, the less you can mess up. But I mean, again, that's a geeky answer of we do studies all the time. And what we've realized is those are the main things that all good shooters do, or most good shooters do, but there's so many different ways to get to those results.
What I will say about that is, at least for the players that we have in the gym, when you actually dive deep into the conversations about, all right, you suck at shooting, you also have an ugly shot, and you suck at shooting, I would say 100% of the time, those conversations lead down to somebody is influencing you in a conscious or subconscious way to make you believe that you have to shoot a certain way, and the way that you're interpreting that language in a behavioral way makes your shot look so freaking shitty, and is making you miss shots. And a lot of the focus goes from how do I put the ball in the basket to how do I create this form that I was told that was correct. One example of this is a player comes in the gym. He's awful. I'm talking to him, and we're at the free throw line. We're doing a shooting drill. And I'm like, do you think when you shoot? I just asked that simple question. Are you what are you thinking about when you shoot? And he's like, nothing. I didn't believe him for a second, whatever. And then he continues, right? I see that his feet are every single time pointed towards the rim, whatever. I'm really starting to pay attention. I'm like, why are your feet always like that every single time, no matter where we start, no matter what we do? It's like, no, I make sure that I get my feet squared and they're parallel every single time to the baseline. I'm like, okay, so you are thinking. And then I keep breaking down, keep going back layer by layer by layer by layer. I find out that he's doing some weird shit with his hands, whatever. And I think that so much of it, and back to what you were saying about Tyrese, it's like, everybody's looking for an answer from everybody else. Everybody's looking for, there's a solution, there's a basketball culture around, there's a correct way to shoot. And I think that if a player isn't attuned enough, they're going to constantly look for something that's informational when the answer that they have is less, do less. Everybody says do less, do less, do less. But then there's more and more information about how to shoot. And that, I think that leads to more and more and more with players. Is that something that you've noticed in conversations? And I think that's such an impactful way to help somebody shoot better is the words that you're the conversations off the court that you have with somebody. What is the things that are going through your head when you're shooting?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that most slumps occur because of overthinking or overcorrecting. Instead of changing something, you should just go back to what's always worked. And then obviously overthinking is just, you got to believe the shot's going in. You can't be thinking about the mechanics when you're out there. I'm a big believer. I think that the 3 C's are the things that matter most in shooting. And that's, comfortable. You got to be comfortable with your shot. You got to be consistent with it. It's consistent. It's repeatable every single time. And if you're comfortable and you're consistent, then you can finally be confident. And those are the 3 C's to me that all good shooters are. They're consistent. You see their shot looks the same every single time. They're confident in it, and then they're comfortable with their shot. And so that's what I think you're working towards. You're not working towards a perfect shot. I would say mechanically, Klay Thompson probably has the prettiest shot, as far as most textbook in the league. But it's not everybody can shoot like that. Not everybody has the biomechanics. Not everybody has the flexibility. Not everybody has grown up with the same practicing routines that he has. And so that's why I don't ever try to emulate somebody else's shot. I just try to get them to feel confident, comfortable, and consistent with their shot.
Do you believe feel for the game is innate or it's something that could be worked on?
It's one of the hardest things to be worked on, to be honest with you. I think feel for the game is probably the hardest thing, and I think that touch is probably the second hardest thing. Touch can be more developed over time because you can do drills to like soften their hands. You can change their hand placement. You can, change where the ball rolls off. But feel is hard. I think you can get better at like playmaking. I think you can get better at reading defenses. I think you can get more prepared. But like the things that you see like a Haliburton or a Jokic do where like they just pat the ball and stuff like that, that's hard to just teach, you know what I mean? So I do think you can improve feel. I do think you can by on film, being more prepared and then also by repping it out, decision making drills and throwing them in different scenarios, that makes your feel for the game improve, your IQ can improve, but the actual like what I'm talking about. That when you say feel, the immediate thing that comes to mind is like somebody that just has this like.
I was thinking exactly those two players you mentioned, Jokic and Haliburton.
Yeah, they have something that I don't think that like is. I think it's you can get closer to it, but they have such a special kind of whatever that is. But feel's the right word for it. They have such a special feel that I think is hard to emulate.
So to me, skill is the options you have, especially as an offensive player. And to define feel for me is like the decisions when to use those skills.
Yeah, but I think you can improve decision making. I think decision making is definitely something that, you look at like, Jayson, for example, when they started, in the 2022 finals, they were, basically tilting the floor. They were running uphill at him instead of staying back, so he couldn't do Euro steps and stuff. Right. They were throwing some things at him defensively that, made him uncomfortable a little bit. And you've seen how much he's grown as a playmaker since then. And that's all decision making. You know what I mean? That's working on not only the passing aspect, but also the vision aspect, also the, when to, what angles to take. So you can improve that. But even with Jayson's improved passing, Joel averaged 6 assists last year, which no one thought he was going to ever be that kind of a good passer. That's all improving his decision making. But the feel, that's still, when you say those special feel, I think that's just hard to kind of give somebody.
Do you rep out passing? Because maybe you actually do have the feel to make the pass, but you don't have the option at the moment with the opposite hand maybe. I think it's important probably to rep out passing. Is that one of the ways you helped Jayson improve as a passer?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to. You have to just, and again, it's something, great coaches make players do what they need to do and don't allow them to do what they want to do. And so I really do. There's times where, as boring as it is, we'll just sit there and do 2-foot finishing, and like, they might be like, bro, like I'm a first team all NBA. It's like, yeah, but this is what will help you get better. And this year he's, in inside 5 feet, I think he's at like 85% right now. And you're like, good thing we did those boring old drills. It might be form shooting. Like there's times where it's just repping out form shooting. And these are some of the best athletes and players in the world, but it's like that's what's going to get you better. And so I don't think the best are never bored with the basics. I think that whether it's passing, whether it's watching film, whether it's doing decision-making drills, whether it's working on 2-foot jump stops and shot fakes, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to get them to that next level.
We're going to start winding down now, but I have to ask you, you were within that process of the Olympics, and obviously Jalen got snubbed and Tatum didn't play much. How much of a motivating factor has that been for them? Because I said before the season, this is dangerous. Like it's human nature to maybe take a little bit of a step back when you just won a championship, right? Maybe get a little content. But now with that kind of offseason that they had, it's probably scary for the league.
Honestly, that's what everyone, the media narrative has been. There's been no
I'm a media
motivation.
guy, Drew,
Yeah, there's no motivation from it. Like Jayson has a chip on his shoulder to become one of the best basketball players that have ever played this game. That chip comes from within. It doesn't come from anybody else. And so I think people are giving too much credit to the situation or the scenario. He's one of the best basketball players that has ever played this game, and he just wants to keep building his resume, and he wants to win championships and hang banners and continue to play at a high level as long as he can. So I know that the media always looks for different ways to put people against each other or put chips on his shoulder, but he's been motivated ever since I met him at 13 years old to to do special things, and he's been able to accomplish a lot of what he was after back then, and he's continuing to try to add to that legacy.
You guys have anything else?
Just a quick dumb question. Is there anything in this vast world of basketball skill development that just bothers you, pisses you off?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've the one thing that bothers me most, and I laugh about this, but there's a good analogy, is like I'm full time with my clients, meaning I work them out during the summer, I travel with them during the season, I put together film after every single game for them. If somebody says, "Who's your trainer?" they say me. I hate when trainers get a guy for one workout or two workouts
We've
and they
talked
post
about
him.
this. Yeah, we've talked about
This is what I always say. I always say, like, at what point would you start posting a girlfriend? You wouldn't post her after you take her out one time or talk to her one time or flirt with her one time. You would wait a couple months and actually have a relationship before you post her and show her off to the world. I feel like basketball trainers should do the exact same thing. If you wouldn't post your girl after one date, after one conversation, then you shouldn't post guys after you work them out once or twice. And that's just my opinion. But again, I think it's because I do pour so much time, energy, and effort. I mean, my girlfriend, she'll see me up at 3 a.m. breaking down film and stuff like that. And I'm like, that's what real skill development is all about. It's about being there when guys, getting them out of slumps when they're in slumps, helping them through the mental challenges that they have to go through, being there to actually build a development plan that is, step by step, that adds certain levels to their game and takes them throughout. But that's what I take most pride in. I started working with Brad Beal and Zach LaVine and RJ Barrett and Jayson Tatum when they were all in high school. And, Joel and those guys, I started working with them before they ever played an NBA game. And I've been with them for their entire career. So to me, I take pride in helping them. I know the reason that they get results is because they put in the work. But I know that I'm like the Wizard of Oz trying to give them what they want behind the curtain. And, and so that's the one thing that when you asked, you probably knew where I was going to go with that. But I mean, it's just, if you wouldn't post a girl after you flirt with her, if you wouldn't post her after one conversation, if you wouldn't post her on your first date, then don't post somebody after their first workout or first time you see them or you're hanging around them.
The crazy thing is they post them. It happens to be always after like a great game or a championship, or that's when the posts really come out. Drew?
Yeah, we're in North Jersey here. North Jersey basketball culture needs to hear this. It's just, it's bad around here.
It is. Again, I like being in the trenches with guys. And to be honest with you, when guys are rolling, I usually stay away. I don't want to mess them up. And when guys are struggling, that's when I'm around. So I'm the opposite of the majority of people when they want to be around when the good times are rolling. And again, yeah, of course, like I was there, watched Jayson, win his first championship. Like I want to be a part of those special moments because I know how much he's dedicated, how much he's sacrificed, and how much hard work he's put in to get those things. But majority of the time, if you see me with a guy, it's usually trying to help them figure out a solution to a problem that they're experiencing on the court.
Love that. I think we're going to wrap it up here. But last thing, how would you approach your own game knowing what you know now, going back to the start? How would you approach it differently?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think the first thing I would do is change my mentality. It's funny. I mean, in the background, you see I have my book that comes out. I wrote a story in there about Isaiah Thomas. And Isaiah Thomas grew up with me playing. And I remember when we were in 8th grade, and we were at this tournament in Vegas, and he was flirting with one of my sister's friends that was down there, and she came back to the room and was like, "Oh my God, like I was just talking to this guy. He said he's going to go to the NBA." And at the time he was, I don't know, 5'3", 5'4", whatever he was in 8th grade. And I was like, "Listen, he's good," because he was really good. He was playing for Friends of Hoop, and I was like, "He's good, but like he's too short to make the NBA." I just didn't think it was realistic. And then sure enough, we played him at Washington. I was at Belmont. We played him at Washington, and he was starting to get that attention where like he might be able to go to the NBA. And then he gets, last pick in the draft and then becomes, a all-star in the NBA. And I'm like, wow, this guy had, like what I call like unbreakable faith. Like he had this confidence, this swagger that I didn't have. And like in high school, I was player of the year in Missouri, won a state championship, knocked off in the state finals, they had 4 Division I players. I was the only Division I player at our school. And I had so much swagger and confidence there. But then when I went to college, I was like too realistic. So I think that that would be the first thing. I shot 48.2% from three my senior year at Belmont, which is 17th all time in Division I history. But I'm like, I was too worried about being perfect instead of like, I'm like, yo, if I would have just shot more, I could have maybe shot 40%, but like been a guy that averaged 25 points. You know what I mean? Like, I just think that I was too much of like, make the right play, don't make the mistakes, instead of like, just be a killer. And I think that like, that's part of the reason why I preach so much to my guys, because I don't want them to have the same, not regret, but like same feelings that I had, whereas like, man, I could have been so much better if I didn't box myself in, or if I felt like there was, no untouchable level that I could get to.
So Drew, thanks for taking the time. Do you have anything coming up that you want to talk about? What's up, man? What's new?
Y'all have seen this in the background. Got my book dropping in February. I just mentioned the Isaiah Thomas article in here, but it's cool. It's got a bunch of like stories that I've never shared before. The foreword's written by Joel and Jayson, but it's basically just tapping into all the stuff that we talked about. It's called Stop Bullshitting Yourself. So it's all about players, coaches, people in general, just using the exact same system that I use with my guys to unlock levels that they've never been able to lock on their own. So.
That's crazy. That's what I want to tell people all the time. That's perfect, man.
It's funny because when I was going back and forth with my publisher, they're like, yo, do you want a cuss word in the bio or in the, in the book title? And I was like, there's just not a better way to phrase it. Like, that's what people need to do to get themselves to the next level, is they got to stop bullshitting themselves. Early we talked about, his sobriety. We talked about him starting early, but like, if you say like diet starts Monday, it's like, dude, if you got to wait till Monday, it's not going to happen. You don't want it bad enough. If there's a player that says like I never feel bad for high school players that cry at the end of the season if they weren't waking up at 5 a.m. shooting 1,000 shots before the school. And I'm like, dude, you didn't do everything you possibly could to put yourself in a position to win. So it's like the pain of the work or the pain of regret. Like, that's what it's all about. So I really do feel that most of our problems in life, whether it's on the court or off the court, in business, in general, if we stop bullshitting ourselves, we have the answers we need to actually get to where we want to get to.
When and where can we get the book?
Pre-order now, but it's going to be available all over Barnes & Noble, Amazon, everything. February 11th, right before All-Star Weekend, is when it drops.
Very cool. You guys have anything to add?
No, I'm excited to read this book. Anybody listening better go buy it immediately.
Immediately. That's how you do it, Drew. You got to say immediately, and then they'll go buy it.
Got to tell them what to do. Right now.
Appreciate y'all.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time.
Drew.
You're always welcome back on the show, and talk soon.
Awesome. Appreciate you guys.